Hello, everyone. This is Rebecca Salauda from Tosa Together. Welcome to a Tosa Talks Building a Diverse, Thriving Community, an ongoing Facebook Live series proudly sponsored by our generous friends at Bostic. Tosa Talks features 3 monthly presentations designed to provide meaningful discussions around racial and social justice issues to support the work of building an inclusive anti-racist community. Tonight, we have a special added edition of Tosa Talks in celebration of Black History Month. We are very excited to have the opportunity to talk with Wisconsin's Lieutenant Governor Mandela Barnes. This presentation has been pre-recorded, so we will not have the usual live Q&A session, but we still welcome and encourage you to add your thoughts and questions into the Facebook comment section during the presentation. Your comments are always valued, and we will try to respond to any questions in a timely manner. Now it's my genuine pleasure to introduce tonight's guest to Tosa Talks. Please say hello to our Lieutenant Governor, Mandela Barnes. Hello, Lieutenant Governor. We are so glad you could join us today to speak to our Facebook audience.
Hey, I'm really excited to be here. The pleasure is all mine, and I'm looking forward to having a wonderful conversation with you.
Great. So while I would love to spend a lot of time talking to you about, the recent budget and all the stuff going on in Madison and across the world, we wanted to keep today's conversation focused on really the theme of Black History Month celebration, which is celebrating the Black family. And so today's conversation is not going to be talking so much about politics, but really talking to you about your family, what's inspired you, and what brought you to where you are today. So just starting with that, in preparing for today, I saw there's been a lot of articles in which you've talked about the influence that your family has had on you growing up. Can you tell us about your parents and what was the most important thing that you learned from each of them?
Absolutely. I love the chance to get to talk to my parents, talk about my parents. They love to hear about themselves. I grew up in a working class family, a working class household. For those who may not know, I talk about it ad nauseum, so it's hard for people not to know. But my mother, she's a retired public school teacher. My father worked on an assembly line, assembling catalytic converters. And so they were both very active union members, but most importantly, they were people who instilled core values within me that I still very much carry to this day. So that was my household structure. I'm an only child. I'm actually only grandchild too, which is on both sides, which is very odd.
A lot of pressure, I assume.
A whole lot of pressure. Growing up, man, I was by myself a whole lot. Just me and my toys, or me and some movies. That's what life was like growing up. Born and raised in the city of Milwaukee. And I think that is an experience that informs all of my decision making. This is home for me. This is the only place I've known as home besides Alabama when I was in college. But other than that, I am Wisconsin through and through.
So you said that your parents instilled the important values in you. What are some of those?
I mean, hard work, right? Like it was very important for my parents to instill a sense of discipline as well. Making sure that I was well aware of things that I could do and things that I could not do. Like the line was very clearly defined. They gave me everything I needed to be, to succeed as a child. And I think about even before I started school, my dad would make sure I knew how to read early. He wasn't going to leave it up to the school for me to learn how to read. He worked on an assembly line, but his degree was in elementary education. So basically 2 educators in the house. And they had a lot of expectations, like you said, with me being the only one. And some of them I still to this day feel are unrealistic expectations. But I always felt challenged by them.
So what, lieutenant governor isn't high enough for
It's not
them?
enough. It's not enough.
So I've also read that you grew up, and you mentioned that you're the only grandchild on both sides, but you grew up close to your grandparents. What benefits did you gain from having that sort of multi-generational influence?
Spent so much time with my grandparents. Both my parents worked full time, and for you know long periods of time, my dad ended up working third shift.
Oof.
But for the most part, they were just they were working. My dad was home when I got home. My mother was there to take me to school in the morning. My mother was there also when I got home. It was just they were busy. But I did spend a lot of time with my grandparents. We lived not too far from them when I was growing up. Um, they were they took me to the mall with them every morning, as that generation tended to do. Go to the mall every morning, walk and have coffee and gossip all morning. Gossip from 8 a.m. until noon. And so was with the friends of my grandparents as well a whole lot, and that whole intergenerational dialogue. Obviously, I didn't realize how important it was then, but it's certainly something that has helped me now because I spent so much time around seniors, and the people who were there. I was like, I was more than just my grandparents' grandchild. Basically, I was everybody's grandchild while I was hanging out with them, and they would do the same thing when it came to reading books. I'm like, oh well, what did you learn today? I had to teach them what I learned, or recite to them what I learned, and they all took a vested interest in my development as a child, and I'm incredibly thankful for it.
It's that sort of village pressure that makes.
Yeah, exactly.
So you started to talk about this, for me, family means much more than blood relatives. It really means about the people around you in your life who have had a positive influence. So tell me a little bit more about some of those people who are not direct relatives, especially since you had such a small family who've had such a positive influence.
Yeah, so I can add the people, like I said, my grandparents' friends for one, and on top of that, with my grandparents, I also went to church with my grandmother a lot, and so I went with my mother also, but we sat in the pews with my grandmother and all her church friends, and I was again essentially their grandchild as well. But my parents' friends, I spent a whole lot of time around too, and I think about some of the people they were friends with who helped me along the way and who also added more and more expectations, right? Like, my godmother, she's a doctor, she's an OB, and she actually delivered me. And
Wow.
I know, so she actually has a very strong attachment. And, her being a doctor, again, created more expectations. She was the one who made sure my parents got me a computer when I was in middle school. They were the one, or she was the one who would, anytime I would say something and she felt it was grammatically incorrect, she would correct me. And she had one son as well. So him being an only child, we were very, very close growing up. He's about like 3 years younger than me, and so I was like a big brother. He got on my nerves a whole lot, but
As young
incredibly.
siblings can.
Yeah, I know, right? But it was like a sibling that I may have, hung out with, once or twice a month. So like so much love for him. But we had a lot. We shared a whole lot of experiences together, and so many people who were friends of my parents like that, who I spent a lot of time with, became my extended family.
That's great. So you've been talking a little bit about growing up. Do you have a favorite memory? Or I guess I hate that question, favorite. A memory you'd like to share with us. Doesn't have to be favorite because there may be many.
So many. I traveled a lot with my grandparents. I guess that's another thing to add. like we traveled. They basically kidnapped me every summer, and we would go on these very long road trips. I mean, I don't mean like here to Tennessee. I mean like here to San Francisco, and then yeah, then back down through Louisiana, then back to Milwaukee. So we would be gone weeks
Wow.
at a time, and yeah, I got to experience so much of the country with them. They were very intentional about spending their retired years doing as much exploration as possible. My grandfather is from Louisiana. My grandmother was originally from Charleston, Mississippi. So uh, their life growing up was much different than mine growing up, and they wanted to spend as much time in a nation that they could actually appreciate.
Yeah.
And so, with them, I was able to go visit, so many different national parks, right? Like I can at least think of going to Yellowstone twice. Went to Grand Canyon with my grandparents. Went to with Mount Rushmore. Like I said, even we would be in California. And honestly, I the place we actually probably went the most was Vegas. I spent so much time in Vegas as a kid with my grandparents. They would take turns. It would be my grandmother, my grandfather, and my dad's brother. So it would be the four of us, and like they would take turns, hanging out with me, and they would go to the casino. We spent a lot of time going to Circus because they could do both. They could gamble, and I could spend time at the arcade there as a kid.
That's funny. So so this just dawned on me as you're talking about your grandparents growing up in Mississippi and Louisiana, not really knowing how old they are. But I'm guessing that there may have been a time of their life when they weren't allowed to vote. I don't know if that's true.
Yeah,
How does
so
that play in with now you're a lieutenant governor? I mean, that's crazy.
yeah, I think my granddad was born in what 26, and my grandmother maybe 32, if I'm not mistaken.
Mhm.
Um, so yeah, and the thing that you know I, that I probably regret is that I wasn't mature enough at that point to have those sort of conversations with them when they passed. My grandmother I was about 17 when my grandmother passed. I was maybe 20 when my granddad passed away. So I didn't get to have those conversations with them. And that was, now that I look back, it's like, I wish I did have those opportunities. They didn't talk that much about it either. And my mother's originally from Alabama as well. And, she was born in, she's born in the 50s. So her experience was also different. My dad was born in Milwaukee.
Yeah.
So for him, his life was much different than my mother's growing up.
Wow. Wow. Um, so you come from a very strong union family. What does that sort of union background, what influence has that had on you?
I mean, so much, right? Like so much. As growing up, I didn't necessarily know what it meant. I didn't know where my dad worked. I just knew he was a member of the UAW. And my mom, I remember she would be going off to conferences, whether it was for the Wisconsin Education Association Council or for the National Education Association. And my dad will all. I do recall my dad saying things about about how I was able to do certain things. He's like, yeah, why you would do this because of union. And and I was like, what does that even mean? And yeah, when I got older, it made me realize so much more. And with this being the 10th anniversary of Act 10, I was very adamant about making sure that I got to Madison to join people who were protesting. At that point, I had a big cast on my arm too because I broke my arm snowboarding. And yeah, I was there with a healing arm, and but it was important for me to be there because I knew that for me to be able to go to school, for me to be able to enjoy a lot of the things that I was able to, it was because of my parents' union membership. And it has helped inform my thinking when it comes to just the rights of working people, whether that is the right to collectively bargain or the right to earn a fair wage. And I think much deeper about systemic inequalities that we face. I think especially income inequality, and we can easily track the rise of income inequality with the decline of union membership. People fought hard. A lot of people lost their lives too to be respected in the workplace. And we see so much of that fading away today, especially with the gig economy, how workers are consistently exploited. I mean, the fast food industry has been so exploitive. Even and the pandemic has absolutely shown a light, especially as people who are working for some of the most profitable companies are still, they still have to go to work with very few protections. Hazard pay is in question. Some people don't always get the PPE that they deserve, and these companies are still getting richer, much more profitable, even in the pandemic, and people's wages haven't gone up. And that's a problem that union membership can help solve. It can help balance things out, and because it has done that before.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. The fact that we have even the weekend coming up.
Yep.
The union member.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm one who loves traditions. So you talked about favorite memories. What were some of the traditions that were really important growing up?
I mean, holiday meals. Holiday meals is probably the biggest tradition. We all got together and just ate. It was just the eating part. And then even you know church programs as well had to. I remember having to prepare, not prepare, but learn an Easter speech every year
Oh, wow.
for our program. I remember Christmas plays. Had to participate and had to learn my lines and my role. So yeah, holidays is just the biggest when it comes to tradition for me.
Yeah, making it, I think for so many people, which is what has made this pandemic so.
Yep, absolutely. People have not been able to celebrate and convene with each other as they usually have, and it takes a toll
Yeah.
on people. It absolutely takes a toll, and that's one of the most frustrating parts about all of this.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, here's to hoping that.
It's the hoping.
So I also read in one article about the impact on you to see Barack Obama, a Black president, in what you saw as sort of possibilities for your future. So do you see yourself as a role model, and what type of role model do you see yourself as?
Sorry, I clicked mute somehow. This is before Barack Obama was president. It was when he was a state senator running for U.S. Senate. For me, that was the first time I saw him, and was incredibly inspired. Behind this computer monitor, there's a big Barack Obama poster, and to the right of the monitor, there's the book A Promised Land. So still has a tremendous impact on my life, my way of thinking, and what I perceive as possible. And I'll say that I wouldn't call myself one, but I understand that the position that I'm in, there are people who see something that they haven't seen before. And I completely acknowledge that position that I'm in. I take it very seriously. And that's why we spend so much time, doing school visits. And we've been doing so many, virtually now, but, in 2019, we were just visiting so many schools all across this state, because it's important for children. It's important for young people, again, to know what's possible. You can look through, they can look through history books, they can look through, you know, just whatever means. They can look on the news, and they don't often see people who look like them, or more importantly, they don't see people who always share their experiences. And it can be easy to assume that you have to be really rich to run for office. And that's the big problem, because the
You're
people,
not really rich.
look at what's behind me. So like the thing is, you don't have to be rich, and the issue there is that the fact that there have been so many people who've just been very concerned with accumulating wealth, and public office is just a next venture for them, and it takes away a possibility for people who actually have had lived experiences that so many other people are dealing with. It sort of discourages them from running for office. It discourages them from thinking about running for office, because they don't see a place for them. If politics shouldn't be something that's only afforded to people who can afford it. And I think that the biggest problem in our government at every level is the fact that people aren't able, people are completely disconnected from the reality of Americans, of people in Milwaukee, of people in Wisconsin, because they haven't walked a mile in the shoes of others. I think about my own personal experiences that I've dealt with. Unfortunately, I talk about this all the time. I've lost a number of friends to gun violence. I've lost a number of friends to addiction, lost a number of friends to criminal justice system. And I think about how many people are making decisions that could have saved their lives, that have no idea what any of those people were ever going through. And so they'll read a report, they'll read a study, they'll see something in the news, and they'll make their decision that way without having any real knowledge of what's going on. And on the other, to counter that, like, I make sure when I'm talking about something, I'm going to show up, right? As lieutenant governor, I have to take on way more issues than I've had to take on as a state representative, for instance, representing a district in the city of Milwaukee. I live there. I know what I'm talking about, because I know the people. I knocked on all those doors. But when we have issues concerning rural prosperity, when that stuff comes up, I'm not just going to make up something. I'm not just going to go off of what I read or what I've heard. I'm going to show up to those communities. I'm going to have conversations with people. I'm going to spend time there, because that is the only way you learn what's actually going on. And it's frustrating that other people don't always take the time to do that, especially when it comes to issues that are prevalent in the Milwaukee area.
Yeah, I love that personal touch, that personal knowledge. It reminds me of Justice Thurgood Marshall had probably my favorite dissent that he wrote, and I'm gonna screw it up right now, but it was challenging that it had to do with paying a fee for somebody who is impoverished.
Mm-hmm.
And he just said, and they were like, oh, look, this fee isn't that much. It's, the cost of, a movie ticket. And he was like, are you guys crazy? Do you think these people are going to the movies? They don't know where they're going to get their next meal.
It's a total disconnect. It's a total disconnect.
Yeah.
People are so separated from reality. I've had, I remember a job I had where one day, all of a sudden, my hours went from 40 to 29. And going under that full-time threshold meant that you didn't get the other perks that came with full-time employment. Right. And most importantly, meant that I didn't have the income that I had before. It's over 25% of the income just disappeared overnight, right? So you have to figure out decisions about, cost of living. What food am I actually going to eat this time now? How do I make the choices that are going to get me through this? And too many people in office have never had to face that before. A lot of people have lived a very pampered or privileged life and assume that is the case for everybody. And if it's not the case for somebody, then they just must not be trying hard enough.
Right. Yeah. Without getting too Oh, I was just thinking of it has gone viral, this mayor in Texas who went off on people saying,
Yes, I saw it. Yeah, it was so bizarre.
yeah,
It was out of
yeah,
control. That's the thought process of a whole lot of people in office who aren't bold enough to say it publicly. At least this dude said it publicly, because we got a lot of people in office right now who govern that way.
yeah, unbelievable. Um, so now that we've talked about all kinds of depressing things and hard things, so politics can be hard and can be depressing. So what do you do to ignite your fire, to get motivated to address these very difficult issues each day?
The fact that there aren't enough people who are doing it, and I'm not going to sit here and say nobody's doing it, but we need as many people as possible who are going to take on these issues. And to see a lot of people in positions of power just totally neglect the most vulnerable. Like I said, I spent a lot of time in church and growing up, and then becoming an organizer in a faith-based organization that led with some very progressive values that really look deeper into religious texts as a whole, not just texts of Christianity or Judaism, but texts of so many other different faiths, Islam, Buddhism, whatever the case may be. And I just always come back to a lot of that stuff where it's just like, well, what are we actually doing for people? How can we best serve those among us? How do we tip the scales of power to provide some opportunity to a person, to a community, to people who've never had it before? And I think about when I lost the race about 5 years ago. Like, it was challenging for me, and I had to really ignite a fire at that point, 'cause I could have easily just checked out. I had some opportunities that came my way where I could have made a whole lot of money and just and just threw my hands in the air. But I realized, when I had to, like, give a concession speech on the spot, and I didn't write one because I was just so sure it was going to win. I guess those are probably some of the truest words I had ever that ever just come out of my mouth, because they were so raw, and I was consumed with emotion at that point. And it was just, well, the issues that I talked about during the campaign weren't necessarily just going to go away because I got elected, and they're certainly not going to go away because I lost. Like, these things are still going to be here. People are still going to need help. We're still going to need to fund our schools. We're still going to need to do everything we can do to protect this planet. And we need to make sure that people have access to good jobs and healthcare. And with that still being the case, like, it would have been irresponsible of me to just walk away because I didn't win my election, when so many people are going through so much more, and that pain isn't just going to go away, right? Like, it would have been very selfish to just check out at that point. And I realized that, through the things that I talked about, the issues that I brought up that weren't always getting addressed at the forefront. It's like, well, so many people that I met were like, well, thank you for talking about this, because we're just not hearing it. And I felt like I would have been not just giving up on myself, but giving up on so many other people if I just checked out. And that was something that I couldn't let myself do.
That's great. That's great. Well, thank you. Um, so we're getting up on the time, but there's a couple of quick questions I did want
Go
to
ahead. Go
do.
ahead.
So, so Kimberly Crenshaw, not sure, so you're familiar with her, has said that we must begin to tell Black women's stories, because without them, we cannot tell the story of Black men, white women, or anyone else in this country. So tell me about the Black women in your life, either that you know, or who you don't know, who are role models and have made an impact on you.
Yeah, I mean, my mom, my mom, her mom, her mom's mom, my father's mother, my father's mother's sister, like, just so many, right? Like, that's just my godmother.
Yeah.
It's more of a fact of life, for me, because this has been my experience. My mother, um, obviously a person who has been a huge part of my life. Is still a huge part. Plays yeah, sometimes a larger than necessary role.
As do all moms. Speaking as a mother myself.
Yeah, so I think it's a fact of life, right? I mean, I guess for some people it's different given what your experience may or may not be, but it's just sort of the way that I operate.
That's great. Now, you go. I originally thought that your first name is Mandela. That isn't. It isn't.
It's my name. Well, if we're gonna
But
get
it's the name
technical,
that you go by.
no, I have always been Mandela. The GOVT name is J Mandela Barnes. The letter J. That is it. I've never been called J in my life.
And I know because I do follow you on Twitter, you go by the Elder Mandela, which I always love that.
there's a story that goes with that.
So that's what I'm asking. Tell me about
It's a funny story.
of your name.
It's a funny story.
Yeah.
I was in Racine once, probably back in 2010, and was working on a campaign, and I was supposed to be invited to an event. And I guess the person told the event organizer, "Hey, can you save a ticket for Mandela?" And the person, "Oh yeah, I'll save a ticket for Mandela." and and the person's like, "Okay, whatever that was about." And then they called. They said, "Hey, did you get your ticket yet?" I was like, "No, nobody's called me." So I guess they checked back with the person. They said, "Hey, Mandela said he didn't get his ticket yet." Like, "Oh yeah, Mandela called you and said that he didn't get his ticket yet." And they're like, "Yeah, no, he didn't get his ticket yet." And so like a couple days passed, the event was over, and like a couple days later, somebody said, "You never showed up to the event." So I never got a ticket. And then like the person they reached out to them, then it's like, "Hey, Mandela said he never got his ticket. I'm with him right now." "You're with Mandela?" It's like, "Yeah, Mandela Barnes." He said it's like, "Oh." He was like, I thought you were like joking. I thought you were saying Nelson Mandela was coming to our event." I'm like, "No, it's the other Mandela." And then it stuck. Became the thing.
I like it. So in general, how is the name Mandela, has that had, other than not being able to go to the event,
I know.
what kind of impact has that had on you?
Oh, a huge impact. There is growing up, that's all anybody ever says. "Oh, you got a whole lot to live up to. You got a big responsibility." Like, yeah, I guess so. But it helps. Like when I said my parents placed some unrealistic expectations on me. This is one of them.
I'm seeing the weight going on your shoulders.
Yeah. Yeah.
Then you've talked about the people in your life, but you also grew up in at least for part of your upbringing, as I understand it, in one of the most under-resourced neighborhoods in the city, often seen as a difficult place to grow up. So how did that impact you, and what were some positive things that you got out of that?
Oh yeah. So we're on 26 and Locust is it's a challenge community, right? Still is to this day. But it helped me in terms of, especially as I'm older. And when I was younger, I didn't. Another thing that I just didn't realize, but when I got older, it made me think about like, all right, well, what was the difference, between me and somebody who lived next door to me, right? What was the difference between me and someone who lived down the block from me? And like I always say, it comes down to opportunity, and it also helped me to stay in touch with reality, a reality that not enough people understand. When I talk about issues of criminal justice reform, it's deeply personal to me because I know people very close to me who have been impacted directly by the issue. I remember a person when I was growing up, who was friends with my dad, and all of a sudden he wasn't coming around anymore. And I asked my dad about him. He's like, "Oh well, he went to go work for the state." And he put it like very like he cushioned it for me. I was like, okay. And then like I got older, I was like, hey, still never seen him. Whatever happened? You know, a lot of people have jobs. And he's like, oh no, work for the state. That meant he went to jail. And I was like, oh, okay. All right. Well. And so, you know, even at a young age, like knowing people who weren't bad people at all. This is not a bad person I'm talking about.
Right.
You know, it was a person like theoretically my parents could have like they would have could have theoretically let him watch me at some point if they had to go somewhere. And like it just that's the thing that like will always stick with me for the rest of my life, because it is by no means an isolated situation. It's by no means a unique situation. And I think about how issues have or I think about issues of you know, being tough on crime, and you know, people who are in prison for nonviolent offenses, how that has uprooted communities, uprooted neighborhoods, uprooted families, when you know, we're talking about people who could be much better served for themselves and for the greater society through programs that could help them get a job, through programs that could help them, you know, meet whatever need may exist in their lives, right? Like I said, this is not a person who is going to go out and harm somebody by any means. And there are just too many stories like that. Way too many.
Yeah. Yeah. Your description of your family friend brings to also a quote that's very meaningful to me from Brian Stevenson.
I had a chance to meet him 2 years ago.
I'm so,
Yeah, we had a chance to meet.
oh, I'm so jealous. He's one of my heroes. But he talks about, you know, we are not, you know, the worst thing that we have ever done. And he's working with death row inmates.
Yep.
But I think that applies to all of us. You know, who among us has not made an error, but are otherwise good people who can be very valuable to society. So I'd like to wrap up. I know I've already taken more time than we had planned, but just the last thing is Judge Derek Mosley has been doing this great thing about a daily Black History Month fact, or however you phrase it. And I'm somebody, I love reading history. So is there again, I don't like to say favorite, a lot, but is there a little known Black history fact, or one that you think, you've said you visited a lot of the schools, that you think that should be taught in schools that isn't being taught?
I mean, it's more of a just a little nugget. Just in general, it was first black man ever run for president. A guy by the name of George Edwin Taylor, who ran on the the National Negro Liberty Party, and he actually has a Wisconsin connection. He spent time as a labor leader here in Wisconsin, in the La Crosse and Prairie du Chien area.
Wow.
George Edwin Taylor.
And when was that about?
Oh, I feel quizzed now.
No, sorry.
No, it's fine. It was early 1900s.
Okay. About the time when the labor movement was really getting moving.
This is possibly like 1904. Wow. Yeah.
That's cool. I'll have to look them up.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Well, thank you so much. So I'd like to ask everyone who's watching to please join me in thanking Mandela Barnes, our Lieutenant Governor, for taking the time to talk with us today. We really appreciate you sharing your experiences, your insights, and talking so personally about your family. I've really enjoyed that. Thanks also to you, our Facebook audience, for your time and interest. We will be sure to respond to your comments and questions as soon as possible. And a special thank you to our generous friends at Bostic, whose support makes the entire Tosa Talks series possible. Please join us again on Thursday evening, February 25th at 7 p.m. for a Facebook Live Talks discussion with the local educator, researcher, and advocate, Monique Liston. As always, you are welcome to reach out to Tosa Together through our Facebook page, our website, or by emailing us directly at tosatogether@gmail.com. This is Rebecca Salauda with Tosa Together, and it's been my pleasure to be here with our guest, Mandela Barnes, as well as with all of you. Thanks for being part of Tosa Talks and our mutual effort to build a diverse, thriving community. Thank you again so much for taking your time.
Thank you for having me.
All right.
Monique Leeson has been a friend for like 20 years now.
Really?
Yeah.
Well, you'll be on in the same week then together. Thank you.